When I first discovered ETFs, I couldn't believe how easy they made investing. Until then, I picked and traded stocks myself, but this wasn't always a success even though I made money as a day trader. With ETFs, I was instantly diversified and at a fraction of the cost. It was like investor heaven. What I didn't know was that the ETFs I invested in were actually pretty expensive compared to others. I also wasn't nearly as diversified as I thought I was. These mistakes cost me. Not catastrophically, but enough that I wish someone had told me about them on day one. To make sure that doesn't happen to you, I'm going to show you the 5 things you must always check before buying an ETF. I'll also explain the risks you run if you don't. And I'll show you how to make sure you always buy the right ETFs for your portfolio, so that you don't find out 20 years from now you could have made $50,000 more on the exact same ETF if you just checked this one little number. Finally, I'll tell you about something most investors never even consider, but that could quietly cost you more than everything else on this list combined. Hi, my name is JC. I'm a best-selling finance author, and on this channel I talk about how to build long-term wealth smarter and faster. The first thing you should always check before buying an ETF is something that many ETF investors, especially beginning ETF investors, don't even know about, but that can quietly cost you tens of thousands of dollars over time without you ever noticing it. I'm talking about the expense ratio, the annual fee the fund charges you to manage it. ETFs have the reputation of being cheap, and they are. The average ETF is significantly cheaper than the average mutual fund. But there's cheap, and then there's, a little less cheap. And over time, a little can become a lot. Take State Street's S&P 500 ETF, the SPY. It charges 0.0945% a year. That's genuinely low compared to State Street's S&P 500 mutual fund, which costs 0.71% a year. But it's significantly more expensive than Vanguard S&P 500 ETF, the VOO, which costs only 0.03% per year. Now, maybe you're thinking 0.09%, 0.03%, that's not a difference, that's a rounding error. Except that it isn't, because that tiny difference can easily compound into a gap of more than $50,000 over 30 years. For an ETF that owns the exact same stake in the exact same companies. And that's just comparing to ultra cheap ETFs. Some more niche or actively managed ETFs charge upwards of 0.5, 0.75 or even 1% per year. And some of those still invest in the same stocks or bet on the same industries as that ultra cheap S&P 500 ETF. Over a few decades of investing, the fees of those expensive ETFs can easily drain 6 figures from your portfolio, quietly and invisibly, every single year. So before you buy an ETF, always check the expense ratio. For broad market ETFs, anything under 10% is reasonable. Under 0.05% is great. The lower the better, of course. If the expense ratio is relatively high, look for cheap alternatives that offer the same exposure. Let me know in the comments below what the most expensive ETF is in your portfolio and why you think it's worth it. The second thing you should always check before buying an ETF is what you're actually buying. This sounds obvious, but most investors actually skip this step, and it leads to a very specific kind of mistake. For instance, many investors buy a global or world ETF because they want broad international diversification. They want exposure to Europe, Asia, emerging markets, the full picture. They think a global ETF will get them this, but here's the thing. Most so-called global ETFs are not equally spread across global markets at all. In most cases, 65 to 70% of their holdings is in US assets, because the US is by far the world's largest advanced economy, and so it dominates every cap-weighted global index. Take the MSCI World Index, one of the most widely followed global benchmarks. BlackRock's iShares Core MSCI World ETF tracks this index, but despite its name, more than 70% of it is in US stocks. About 16% goes to European stocks and 9% to Asia Pacific, and then 4% to Canada. That's not really a world ETF, that's a US-heavy ETF with some international exposure mixed in. This isn't necessarily bad, of course. Investing in the US economy has been a winning bet for most of the past 100 years. But if you bought that world ETF specifically to diversify away from US holdings, you are unknowingly undermining yourself. So before you buy an ETF you might keep in your portfolio for decades, spend some time figuring out what it's actually investing in, because a lot of ETFs look more diversified than they really are, and the name on the label doesn't always match what's inside the box. The third thing you should always check is how much overlap the new ETF has with what you already own. In other words, how much does it duplicate your existing portfolio? This is one of the most common mistakes I see in ETF portfolios. Someone owns an S&P 500 ETF like the VOO or SPY, for instance, but they also own a growth ETF to capture upside, and a tech ETF because they're bullish on AI. They feel diversified, but they're not, because the growth ETF's top holdings, Apple, Microsoft, Nvidia, are the same companies dominating the S&P 500, and the tech sector ETF is even more concentrated in the magnificent 7 companies that dominate the S&P 500. So the vast majority of their entire diversified ETF portfolio ends up being concentrated in just a handful of big tech companies. The fix is simple. Before you buy in a new ETF, run it through a free overlap checking tool like the one at etfrc.com. It'll show you exactly how much overlap your ETFs have, right down to specific holdings. It'll take you 2 minutes, but it can save you years of quietly diluted diversification. I'll leave a link in the description. The fourth thing to check is liquidity, specifically the bid-ask spread. This is another one of those little things many investors don't check, but they can quietly eat into your returns, especially if you're a more active investor. Like stocks, ETFs trade on an exchange where buyers and sellers come together. The bid is what buyers are willing to pay for a share, the ask is what sellers are asking. The difference is the spread. The spread is also what you'll pay on every transaction. Now, for big liquid ETFs like the VOO and the SPY, that spread is almost nothing. We're talking like fractions of a penny per share. But for more niche ETFs, like a leveraged sector fund or a single country ETF or a highly specialized actively managed ETF, that spread can easily jump to 1/4 of a point or even higher. Do that a few times a year in a taxable account and you're leaving real money on the table. So before you consider buying a niche ETF, always check the spread. Most brokerage platforms show this in real time. If the spread looks very wide, it's a red flag. Either find a more liquid alternative or at minimum use a limit order instead of a market order so you control the price you pay. As a side note, I would add that for most investors, actively trading ETFs is not a good idea in the first place, but I know many investors do this anyway. So if you do, at least make sure you're not shaving off 1/4 point of your return every time you're executing an order. The fifth and final thing you should always check is something many investors never even think about: tax efficiency, specifically where you hold your ETFs. Most investors focus entirely on picking the right ETF, but spend zero time thinking about what account to hold it in. This is a big mistake that can cost you tens of thousands of dollars over time, if not more. Different types of investments generate different types of taxable events. Bond ETFs, for instance, kick off interest income, which is taxed as ordinary income, up to 37% at the top federal bracket. High dividend ETFs generate dividend income, which can also be heavily taxed depending on whether those dividends are qualified or not. In a taxable brokerage account, you're paying those taxes every single year whether you want to or not. The solution isn't to avoid these ETFs, it's to put them in the right account. Bond ETFs and high dividend ETFs belong inside a tax advantage account like a 401k, IRA or HSA, where the income compounds without an annual tax drag. Your broad market equity ETFs, the ones that generate minimal income and grow mostly through price appreciation, are generally fine in a taxable account because you only pay taxes when you sell. Asset allocation is one of the most important decisions you make as a long-term investor. Just look at the difference between putting $25,000 in a bond ETF yielding 4% in a taxable account or in a Roth IRA. Held in a taxable account, the taxes will be $240 in the first year alone if you're in the 24% bracket, more as your balance grows. But in a Roth IRA, you keep the full 4% every year for decades. Compounded over 30 years, the bond ETF in the taxable account will grow to $61,392, which is nice, but not nearly as nice as the $81,084 it would grow to in a Roth IRA. By using a taxable account instead of a Roth, you effectively lose nearly $20,000 to taxes and lost compounding power. So before you buy an ETF, always ask yourself, is this the right account for this type of ETF? If the ETF yields income from dividends or interest payments, you should generally keep it in a tax advantage account. I recently did a deep dive on the 5 main tax advantage accounts and how to use them. So if you're interested in this, I suggest you check it out. I'll link at it at the end of the video. None of these 5 things are hard to check or difficult to decide on. You just have to take a little time to do it. Expense ratios and market breakdowns, which markets and assets an ETF actually invests in, are things you can easily find in the ETF's fact sheet on the fund provider's website. For overlap, use the free tool in etfrc.com I mentioned, or another free tool that does the same thing. Always check the bid-ask spread of the ETF, especially for specialized ETFs you plan to hold on to for only a few weeks or months. And if you're buying an ETF that yields income, put it in a Roth IRA to keep your taxes as low as possible. Do this every time and you'll never buy the wrong ETF or hold it in the wrong place again. Before you go, I want to share some footnotes with you, stuff that didn't quite make it in the video, but that I still feel is valuable to share with you. When I first started investing in ETFs, I actually bought State Street's ETF, the SPY, the one that costs 0.09%. I didn't look at the price, I just bought it because it was the first and oldest S&P 500 ETF. When I found out about the price difference with the VOO, I switched. But then I wondered why the SPY even still existed if it was so much more expensive than the VOO. It turns out one of the biggest reasons it still exists is because it was the first one. When the SPY first came out, financial institutions built their trading and investing infrastructure around it, and that never really changed. Institutional traders still trade heavily in the SPY, much more so than in the VOO, even though today the VOO is the biggest ETF in the world. Because the institutional investors trade so heavily in the SPY, its spread is slightly lower than that of the VOO. It's not much, it's fractions of a penny, and it doesn't really matter to retail investors, but to professional investors who trade in and out of enormous positions multiple times a day, it does matter. At the same time, the expense ratio hardly matters at all to these kind of traders because they never hold on to their positions very long. When I mentioned specialized ETFs, it was mostly to warn about their higher expense ratios, and they are more expensive. But specialized ETFs are also a great way of adding your market view to your portfolio without having to resort to picking individual stocks. If your market view turns out to be correct, then holding the right specialized ETFs can greatly amplify your returns, though of course you can also lose more if it doesn't. I'm actually thinking of doing a whole video about the most popular specialized ETFs, so let me know in the comments if you'd like to see this and I'll do a video about it. The final thing I would have loved to talk more about is rebalancing your ETF portfolio as a taxable event. What many investors don't realize is that every time you sell an asset you hold in a regular brokerage account, the profits are taxed as capital gains, even if you're just swapping one ETF for another. Now maybe you think, it doesn't matter because you're not planning on selling your ETF investments anytime soon, but market conditions change, and when they do, you may want to rebalance your portfolio. Now if you also have a 401k or an IRA or both, you could consider minimizing rebalancing your regular brokerage account and instead rebalance heavier in your tax advantage accounts where you don't have to pay capital gains taxes. The tax side of investing is underrepresented in many videos about investing, and I get it, it's a little boring, but exploiting the benefits of tax advantage investing can literally save you tens of thousands of dollars over time. If you feel you're a little light on knowledge about tax advantage investing, I recommend you watch the deep dive I did on the 5 most important tax advantage accounts. It will quickly get you up to speed. And if you found this video useful, hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow and get the video in front of other people who are also investing in ETFs and might be making some of the mistakes we addressed. Keep building long-term wealth smarter and faster, and I'll see you in the next one.